1867 Sports Show coming back at you for episode number Patrice Bergeron tonight. We got the midnight edition with Kyle Skinner and the Wolfman here. What's going on, man?
I was gonna say, do we need to take on like shock jock radio alter egos here? Because middle of the night that we're recording this now.
And we're back. Man in the can, get back in that can.
Oh my
Um,
God. Yeah.
I,
Well,
I,
look how
I
quickly you came up with Patrice Bergeron there too, as opposed to 36 that no one has apparently ever worn in the history.
we were just kind of segueing between 35 and 37. So 36 has happened to fall in there somewhere. And yeah, we may do. We may do. But yeah, buddy, what's going on? I know that obviously we're recording a little bit later tonight than we usually do. Any particular reason for that? Or you want to keep that on the down low?
Oh, I'm gonna plead the fifth on that one there, but we'll pretend like I was just watching replays of the good old President's Cup there, because you know what? They lost, but it was entertaining. There was some rockabye baby, Steph Curry go to sleep flop shots going on. They got swept on the first day. They came back and swept on the second day. So fun little event, even though Mikey Weir and the boys ultimately ended up coming up a little bit short against the U.S.
Yeah, but I think some of the best moments were definitely the back and forth between the Americans and the international team. So that was probably one of the more fun golf tournaments that I think I've seen in a long time, outside of the Waste Management Classic, of course. But yeah, what was it? Is it Tom Kim
Yeah.
and Scotty Scheffler were just going back and forth for about six straight holes, and it was unbelievable to watch.
Him all weekend long was appointment TV there, because even when he was losing, it was wildly entertaining. And,
Yeah.
I think there's no shortage of showmanship, we will say, in the Kim household there, because little did I know, apparently Gangnam Style is still very much alive and well over across in the good old continent of Asia, because there was a whole lot of side dances and whatnot going on after any victories got closed out from those boys.
I don't think that dance is going away ever. We know how long dances from our, youth, like the Macarena and things, have kind of stood the test of time. So maybe this is, the what is it, Gen Z's version of the Macarena.
Yeah. YMCA.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Young man.
yeah. And this is why you can tell we're both tired, because we're just yammering right now about absolutely nothing. But anyways, yeah, the President's Cup definitely had some entertaining moments. I know a lot of people who actually went down to go see it, and apparently hotels were booked within like a 3 hour,
Drive.
3 hour drive of the location. So I think it was kind of a nightmare, to get around. But overall, I think they delivered on the entertainment value for sure. But yeah, we mentioned Patrice Bergeron off the top of the show, and obviously great Boston Bruin, original six, member. But we had two other original six teams that were playing an exhibition game the other night, and something pretty significant happened. I don't
Things
know if
got
anyone
spicy.
Things got a little chippy. Patrick Laine, we mentioned him last episode about the impact that he can have on the Montreal Canadiens, and it proceeded to last one preseason game before he took a knee-on-knee hit and is now going to be out for 2 to 3 months with his severe knee sprain.
Is there an
So
1867 show curse that we're establishing now? We're like the Madden video game franchise curse, or what?
well, what's the other one that happened? Oh no, it was our mid-year, but that was for the positive though, for the
Yeah,
mid-year
yeah,
CFL review.
yeah. It's October. I think there's like a Friday the 13th this month. There's Halloween. We're taking a hard right here now, and it's now the 1867 show curse.
We're burying the hand with the Tiger Cats, and Bully by Mitchell's all of a sudden the front runner for most outstanding player. Like, what happened? What's happening here? But anyways, Kyle, your thoughts on the line A hit? Because obviously it wasn't good. It looked really bad at the time. I think 2 to 3 months is actually a very good news story for all involved.
Yeah. Well, again, right? You absolutely hate to see it because of everything that we detailed with Patrick Laine on the last episode. So you can go
Yeah,
back and listen to good old episode 36 for our thoughts on that. So
our perfect number episode.
Oh God, here we go. Mathematizing, late night mathematizer. But yeah, so you obviously, first and foremost, right, there's a human element to it. You never want to see anyone get hurt, especially someone who is trying to essentially hit the reset button on their career here. And
Yeah.
so that's obviously the headline with a bullet. What is interesting about how it played out, and again, I have absolutely no horse in the race because, as an Ottawa Senators fan, if the entire rosters of the Toronto Maple Leafs and Montreal Canadiens were just said, nope, we're not going to play this season, I wouldn't lose too much sleep over it. But that being said, for all the talk that hockey says about cleaning up the game and doing the right thing and possibly even taking fighting out of the game, and the minor hockey is taking steps towards that. And guess what? The hockey purist in you says he absolutely deserved to get, his bell rung as far as some retribution for sticking out his knee there, that Cedric Poire, who ultimately injured Laine. But that whole incident, don't know if you saw it or not. What was the instant flashback to? Oh, Todd Bertuzzi and Steve Moore, and someone never played hockey after that and ended up filing I think at the time it was like an $86 million lawsuit, ended up getting settled, right? They never
Yeah.
disclosed the figure, but Steve Moore never ended up playing. And that whole, Zarber chasing him around, he's trying to get him to go. He's not going, and I'm just going to grab you. And, didn't take the mitts off. So I think that's how he ultimately avoided suspension. But eerily reminiscent of that situation that played out all those years ago, that thank God no one got hurt, but we've seen in the past how it can go sideways. So again, the Leafs fans will say, how in the world did he get away with only a fine and no suspension, with the Department of Player Safety trying to say we're cleaning up the game, blah, 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 right? Habs fans will say he had it coming. He took out our star player. He broke the code. So both of their opinions can essentially be thrown out here because they're firmly entrenched in that. As a casual observer, yeah, the NHL's talking out of both sides of their mouth here, because you can have it both ways. You could have suspended him and sent a message, but you could have also given him a slap on the wrist suspension to say, like, all right, it might have been warranted in sort of that old school mentality, but you can't do that in 2024 anymore.
Yeah. And for those of you who are looking at the spelling of the aforementioned Montreal player, it's Arbor Jacki, who is the player
Wi-Fi.
in question. Yeah. But
You want to
essentially,
talk
I
about skating around things? Did you see how eloquently I did that?
yeah, and I was waiting for it because I know that your phonetic pronunciation is the weak point of your very vast knowledge of sports trivia here, but yeah, figured I'd help you out a little bit. But at the end of the day, I'm kind of more towards the what I'm really okay with Jacki doing what he did. He's in the league for a reason, right? He's protecting a player who ultimately is going to help Montreal win games. Now, at the end of the day, do we want to see a situation happen where he's chasing, it's not happening? Probably not. But at the end of the day, that's Pare's responsibility to, I messed up. I stuck my knee out. It was very blatant. I know I got to answer the bell here. So if you're going to back away from that responsibility, then I don't really have a lot of sympathy for you if the repercussion happens afterward. So like I said, I'm okay with the NHL just giving him a fine and not suspending him, because at the end of the day, it's not like he really wailed on him, you know what I mean? It could have been a lot worse. So yeah, I mean, this is just kind of a lesson to a lot of young players who are trying to make these rosters in training camp. It's you can do it, you can play hard, but you got to play safe,
Mhm.
because at the end of the day, this could have ended someone's career. I'm more concerned about the knee on knee hit than I am about the ensuing trying to take someone's head off in a fight.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine Patrick Laine all of a sudden goes through all this you know over the
Adversity.
last adversity over the last year and a half, and only for it to end his career on a knee hit in his second shift.
of the
So
preseason, no less.
of the preseason, yeah.
And
So
that's exactly why you're not going to have to spend very long convincing me that he had it coming. I absolutely agree, right?
yeah,
The hockey purist in me that grew up on Rock'em Sock'em and Don Cherry and oh baby, right? Like all of that. I'm not losing an ounce of sleep over what happened. And to your point, he should have answered the bell and he should have known better as well too, right? But I'm just saying it's a layup opportunity that Montreal's preseason isn't over. You could have had your cake and eaten it too. Just suspend him for the rest of the preseason, and he's ready for night one, which, by the way, is against the Leafs as well too.
yeah, yeah. A little foreshadowing would have been beneficial there. But like I said, at the end of the day, I think that in all of the surrounding issues that were with what happened, I think you could look at the 2 to 3 month timeline of Laine being out as being a positive thing based on what we've seen in the past with guys missing out on a long period of time with those knee on knee hits. And then secondly, Pare did take his lumps with whether it be as much as we would like to have seen it or not. And like I said, Jack Guy got a fine. He's allowed to play. So I think all said and done, they probably looked at the situation saying, you know what, if Laine's coming back in the game, or if he's coming back the next day, then yeah, we'll probably suspend Jack Guy for a game or two or whatever it may be. But seeing how long and how blatant the hit was, I think the Department of Player Safety was like, yeah, you know what, we're kind of penalizing the guy for doing the right thing, and we're not penalizing the guy for the knee on knee hit, which is the more dangerous play. So
Yeah.
there's a little bit of yin and yang there that I think they kind of balanced, and they said, you know what, we'll just kind of go right in the middle. We'll be Switzerland on this one, and we'll just kind of hope that it doesn't happen again, and everyone kind of learns from this.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's a complete non-talking point. If do you think Montreal cares if he plays another shift of the preseason?
No,
No.
just call his no, just bring his brother up. He'll do the same
Exactly, get
thing.
Florian up there, right? So again, it's just a common sense, easy thing that could have probably appeased a lot of parties and just been on your way, but whatever. But again, too, right? Like you've got to look at we're almost entering, some of the more conservative NFL coaches' approaches to these preseason because this isn't the first time you've seen a star player get run, right, and seriously injured in a completely meaningless game, right? And
Yeah,
Mr. Wi-Fi himself has actually been on the opposite end of that because he
yeah,
actually ended Angus Crookshank's entire season in the preseason a few years removed. So he is no angel himself. So I'm not saying that whatsoever.
no,
You look at how some of these NFL coaches will just say like, "No, I'm not even getting, my star quarterback out there for any reps whatsoever because what is the upside of me playing against a bunch of fourth string guys that are playing for their absolute professional lives and they need to make an impact and if that's hitting me 10 seconds late after a whistle and now I'm missing significant time in the actual NFL season, why would I put Patrick Mahomes out there, right?" So again, I think some of these coaches, yeah, you want to shake off the rust and this, that, the other, but I don't know what the solution is. Like, you almost need to make sure that when you do kind of like these split squad games, you almost need to have like a gentleman's agreement that it's like, all right, Leafs, like you guys are putting like Nylander and those boys out there. We'll put Laine and our guys out there because you don't want all these guys that are trying to make an impact and oh, I need to have a huge hit that makes highlight reels and that gets me onto the big club because I'm a career AHLer out there doing something stupid that ultimately has a long-term effect on a top six forward and a big piece of Montreal's offensive puzzle out there. So I don't know what the solution is, but we're starting to flirt with kind of this why would you bother dressing certain players in the preseason? Because even Brady Tkachuk, again, like he's not going to shy away from anything. And he briefly disappeared in the last preseason game. I think it was some sort of dinged up shoulder. Ultimately came back, everything's fine. But like, could you imagine the Ottawa Senators have to go 30 games without Brady Tkachuk to start the year? Well, guess what? Missing the playoffs again here, boys. November swoons happening in October. So
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know.
yeah. It's a fine line you have to walk for sure. And I mean, I think that's where coaches make their money is knowing when to toe the line of like there's competitive balance here, but there's also a restful balance of we don't want our guys taking too many hits, but we also want them getting accustomed to taking hits. So again, it's a fine line. But you mentioned star quarterbacks. And again, perfect segue into what I wanted to talk about tonight from the football side of things. And do you know who the number one team in the Big Ten is right now, Kyle, in the NCAA?
Would that be the Indiana Hoosiers?
The Indiana Hoosiers, rank aside from the AP poll, are the number one team in the Big Ten right now. And this is one,
Above the
not
likes of
happened.
the UCLAs and the other
Yeah,
blue bloods of the Big Ten program, those
absolutely.
corn-fed
The
boys.
USCs and the Washingtons and the Oregons of the Big Ten.
Yeah.
But the Indiana Hoosiers are a surprise top 25 team this year. And they are 5-0 for the first time since 1957. And
I'm
the
not that
biggest
good at math, but I know that's a long time. Right
is
there.
it's a very long time. It's a very long time. That's 67 years for those of you who are keeping track at home. But the biggest reason why we mentioned again this name on the show before, again, almost like we see things into the future and why things are going to be happening. But Kurtis Rourke of the Rourke household, we've got. What do you want me to say? Kurtis Rourke of the Rourke, family. I don't know, but anyways, Kurtis Rourke, younger brother of current CFLer Nathan Rourke, is the starting quarterback for the University of Indiana. And he has been on an absolute heater for them. He's a transfer from Ohio University, as we mentioned before. And the guy is putting up absolutely bonkers numbers for a Canadian quarterback playing in the NCAA right now. Over the first 5 games, he's 93 for 127, which is a 73% completion percentage. He has a quarterback rating, and this is out of 200 in the NCAA, of 189.4. He's thrown for 1,372 yards, which is averaging 275 yards a game, 11 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. He's only taken 5 sacks. And on top of that, he has also ran for 2 touchdowns on top of those 11 touchdowns he's thrown for. Like, Kurtis Rourke is having a stellar season, and he's actually now joined the Heisman list as a
Hey,
dark horse candidate.
Good Canadian kid. Look at him go.
Golf clap for Kurtis Rourke. He is a plus 7,500. So, I mean,
Plus 7,500 for those keeping
plus 7,500 for those of you keeping score at home. But again, long shot to win the Heisman. But I mean, this kid's a dark horse candidate to actually be in the Heisman Trophy running because of the things that are happening at Indiana right now.
Mm-hmm. I agree. He absolutely is living up to the pedigree of, what did you say? The Rourke household?
The Rourke household. The Rourke household.
Yeah, absolutely, right? So again, I think we might need to sprinkle a little do-re-mi just on that long shot odds now that they're actually available for him. And whatever, there's worse things I've spent $10 on in my life if it doesn't ultimately pan. I think whether he ultimately wins the Heisman or not is unfortunately going to be more tied to how well Indiana does, because if they are a college football playoff team and you're trying to tell me that he is not going to be a finalist for it, I don't know what the hell's going on in the voters' minds there. But Indiana's defense, can they keep them frisky for long enough? They haven't played any true, kind of teeth of their schedule at this point there. They've had some nice wins. They've been impressive, right? They've looked well, and they've won the games that they should have won. So they're doing all the right things right now. So full marks to them. But whether he ultimately becomes a Heisman finalist or not, we'll see once they get into the depths of their Big Ten schedule. All that to say, though, full marks to Rourke for what he is doing, because he is putting up video game numbers in a variety of facets, right? And this isn't a case of a team attempting to run up scores or anything. Like, in some of their games that they have handily won, he's comfortably sitting on the bench by the third quarter, right? So it's not like this is someone who is out there trying to put up a 70 spot on some, Div 3 school who they paid $1.5 million just to be on their schedule or anything. So they're doing it the right way. And again, you love to kind of see these programs that aren't traditional powerhouses in that sport get a little bit of a shine, right? Because it does well for the Canadian recruiting front for a Canadian to be having success south of the border in the way that he is, number one. But it also gets a lot more fans involved, right? Because Indiana, don't know if anyone is aware, kind of a basketball town.
Yeah,
So anytime you can get some of that cross sport success there, high tides rise all boats. So it's definitely an exciting time if you are a fan of Indiana sports, between what's going on in college, between Caitlin Clark being on the Indiana Fever and the run that they went on and making the playoffs for the first time in God knows how long there. I think it was almost a decade at that point, right? You've got a now injured, but an exciting quarterback there in Anthony Richardson, and they just beat your beloved Steelers to put the first loss of the season on their record there. So a lot of good things happening in the state of Indiana. And it's the most important position in all of sports. It all starts under center there with Nathan's little brother, Kurtis, who is doing the family name proud.
absolutely. And I like how you snuck in the Steeler loss, by the way, into the show. That's great.
Oh, I love
Um,
it. I love it.
um, but yeah, if you look at the remaining games in their schedule, so they got Northwestern coming up this weekend. So again, kind of one of the bottom tier teams in the Big Ten, arguably going to be a win on the schedule. Then you get into kind of the teeth of your schedule because then you've got a bye week, but then you come back with Nebraska.
Yeah.
After Nebraska, you've got Washington. Not the same Washington as last year, but they're still a competitive team. Then November is kind of the gauntlet, right? You got a tough but not as talented Michigan State team. You got Michigan, and then you got Ohio State in Ohio State.
Could you imagine if they roll into that Ohio State game somehow undefeated still? Like
I mean,
absolute pandemonium. Like that plus 7,500 is going to be down to about plus 700 at that point.
yeah, I think that if they are undefeated going into the last 3 weeks of their season, Kurtis Rourke is going to be a top 5 candidate for the Heisman Trophy at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And then after the Ohio State game, you finish off with Purdue. So, I mean, you really have 3 games, I want to say, that are going to be what's going to be indicative of how Indiana is going to finish their season. Nebraska, Michigan, Ohio State. If you can somehow come out of those 3 games 2-1, I think you're going to give yourself a very good opportunity to not only be in that, top 6, top 10 range to qualify you for the playoff, but you're also going to be in a position where Kurtis Rourke, if he's healthy and he's the driving force behind this, he probably is going to end up in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, we've seen people take these leaps and bounds in the last month of the season because of how well they play and how much they turn up at that time. Now, who's he competing against? I think you've got, a few people that are pretty much at the top of everyone's board right now. Number one being Travis Hunter from Colorado. Pretty hard to unseat that guy unless he, gets hurt like he did last year or his game falls off a cliff, which I don't think it will because the guy is just a phenomenal talent. He's doing things in the NCAA that we haven't seen in 20 years, right? And then we've got, the quarterbacks, Quinn Ewers. He's probably not going to be on the list anymore because obviously he's been hurt the last couple of weeks and Arch Manning's taken over and shown that Texas can run just as well with the backup as Quinn Ewers did. But Jalen Milroe from Alabama, for those of you who did not see that game last week between Alabama and Georgia, I think you understand why Jalen Milroe is probably the Heisman favorite right now.
Yeah.
The guy is an absolutely phenomenal athlete with a great arm. He's improved significantly from last year with his decision making, and he's really putting that team on his back, which I think you've seen a lot of Alabama quarterbacks do who have won the Heisman at the end of the day. And then there's a sleeper pick that not a lot of people know about because he plays at Boise State. But for those of you who have not seen Ashton Jeanty, the running back from Boise State play, do yourself a favor. and watch a Boise State game because this guy is having a historic season thus far at the
You want
running
to talk
back
about
position.
video game
You
numbers?
want to talk about video game numbers? The guy has ran for over 850 yards in 4 games. He's on pace for 39 touchdowns rushing.
Yeah.
These numbers are going to be eclipsing Barry Sanders' numbers, which are record breaking, which have stood since 1988. So, again, you've got a number of people who are qualified contenders for this Heisman Trophy. But again, going back to Kurtis Rourke, if Indiana is walking into their late November schedule either undefeated or one loss, you really have to consider him to be in that situation because Indiana has always been a bottom feeding team, not only in the Big Ten, but across the NCAA.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an exciting time because again, we've never seen this with a Canadian quarterback in the NCAA. We've seen Canadian quarterbacks excel in U Sport and then go on to opportunities to be in the CFL and whatnot. Now we're talking about a quarterback who's putting himself into the category of I could be potential top 2 round draft pick in the NFL if I continue my progression and become the only Canadian quarterback to ever be drafted in the NFL. So let's just kind of cross our fingers and hope that Kurtis, stays healthy and he can showcase his skills against these top level teams and prove that what they're doing so far is not a fluke. Because I'm a Michigan fan. Seeing Indiana good is one, shocking to me, but two, it's a phenomenal thing. It's a phenomenal thing. They had Michael Penix Jr. there before he transferred to Washington. Michael Penix Jr. was always injured, but you can see the talent that he had. Indiana has not had anyone like Michael Penix Jr. until now. So now that you've got a guy, keep him healthy, keep him upright, and draft up some plays that are going to showcase his abilities against these top level teams. I'm very, very much looking forward to the October-November slate of games coming up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And before we move on from that, again, full marks to our friend Mr. Rourke there, but because you brought up Alabama, Mr. Williams, their wide receiver, who, fun fact of the day, if he attends the Senior Bowl, he will have just turned 20 years old when he does that, which is absolutely ridiculous what he is doing out there as a 17-year-old right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's absolutely astonishing because, again, I remember being a 17-year-old, starting and playing and whatnot, and I was overwhelmed at the U Sport level. Now you take it up a notch in the SEC and you see what he's doing down there. So, yeah, like there are some special talents that are playing, every sport nowadays. Like you're getting 14-year-olds running for a gold medal in the Olympics. Like you're getting these high-level athletes that we've never seen before. And yeah, if anyone's looking to project their fantasy football lineup, 3-4 years from now, Ryan Williams is probably a name you want to have on your list because kid's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. You can do some stuff on a football field there for sure.
Yeah. Speaking of doing stuff on a football field, we're going to stick with, the game that I love. And we're going to go back, to the Canadian side of things with the U Sport level. We mentioned last week the York Lions finally got off the schneid. We're talking about, the U Sport, season as it is. You know who the number one team in the country is right now in Canada, Kyle?
Normally the knee-jerk reaction is it Montreal? Is it Laval? But not today.
Not today, because the Wilfrid Laurier University is the number one ranked team in the country, large in part to their head coach, Mike Folds. So, anyone who's not familiar with the name, Mike Folds was a phenomenal, again, we're talking about Canadian quarterbacks, phenomenal quarterback who actually went down to the University of Toledo in the MAC conference and transferred back up to Western, where I had the fortune of playing against him. Record-breaking quarterback, played for Team Canada on the inaugural international team that they put together. Again, you're looking at kind of the prototype guy, 6'2", 220 pounds, big arm, mobile, fantastic player. Got into coaching after he was done. And again, a reason why I brought up York is because he cut his teeth as the York offensive coordinator when he got into coaching. York's offense has never had a better offensive season than they did with him in 2011 when he was named the offensive coordinator. It was quick though because he was one and done, and he ended up getting the job offer to go be the head coach of Wilfrid Laurier University in 2012. Since then, Wilfrid Laurier has gone on to 4 Yates Cup appearances, which is indicative of the top team in the Ontario Conference. They've won 2, one of which was one of the best comebacks I've ever seen against Western, who, again, we talk about number 1 teams in the country. This is a team that hadn't lost a regular season game in 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
Wilfrid Laurier is doing things the way that we see Western do things because Mike Folds, product of Western, has kind of brought that mentality to Laurier, and now we're seeing them really bear that fruit. But again, he's only 42 years old. Is this a situation, because I know where I stand on this, where we could see Mike Folds be kind of that new, hot name in the CFL coaching circle once they kind of get through the also-rans in the offseason? Because I think where I stand, we've seen university coaches take the jump in the past. They've had instant success, but then over time, they haven't stood the test of time. I see Mike Folds getting better, right? And he's only getting better as he gets, kind of longer in the tooth here. So are we going to see a U Sport coach take the next step up to become, either a high-level coordinator or taking on the role of a head coach at the CFL level for an unconventional owner who might want to say, you know what, there's my new guy. I'm not going to go through one of these guys that have, coached 6 of the, 9 teams in the league. I want somebody that's going to shake things up a little bit.
Yeah, and I think you kind of answered your own question right there, right? Is the fact that I personally would love to see it happen in the CFL level, if only so that we get some fresh perspectives and new voices and whatnot in there. And the CFL is certainly not alone in this regard. We've harped on the NHL, how they just, retread the same 40 head coaches for 32 positions, and it's just a game of musical chairs. I think it's exactly what this league needs, right? Is some innovative offense, some new personalities that are in there, and not having the same head coach who, all right, check one more off my, bingo card here. I've almost done the full league at this point, because that's kind of the stage that they're at, right? Like you look at the success that Saskatchewan had, at least in the early part of the season. Now they're up and down, right? But what they did when they went a little bit outside of the box and didn't do a retread head coaching hire, right? And I think if you are an owner who has aspirations of, okay, I'm not going to just keep doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for it to miraculously change overnight, that's the approach you need to take, right? We've seen American coaches try and come up here and, oh, I was, a whiz offensive coordinator at the NCAA ranks or whatever, and it doesn't always translate, right? So you kind of need that homegrown Canadian spin who is familiar with the game and how it's played, and having all the different formations and all of that take maybe a year or two for a compatriot south of the border to kind of pick up on all those little nuances. If you want someone to turn your program around in a hurry, you got to stay north of the border. And I think having that pipeline of, high school, U Sport, CFL, and that's kind of like a legitimate progression for you, is how you keep top tier talents in the Canadian game as well too. So just even putting the CFL aside, like Football Canada should almost be like taking out front page ads for him at this point and saying like, hey, like what are we doing here? So I would love to absolutely see it, but again, I think it'll all ultimately come down to dollars and cents, right? If some hotshot, Div 1 program that has a new head coach wants to bring him in as an offensive coordinator, well, they're probably going to be able to dangle a little bit more do-re-mi in front of him than the CFL will. And I would not blame him one iota if he went south of the border for bigger paydays, right? So again, you got to make sure it's not going to be a situation where Edmonton kind of found themselves in, where we've got so many former coordinators and coaches on the books that we can only offer you blank, because that's not going to be enough to entice him to leave what is right now probably his fiefdom to do as he pleases with on that Laurier campus, to come over here and work for a pittance.
And that's kind of the grass is greener on the other side type of scenario, right? You look at all these visions of grandeur where, yeah, if I were to take the head coaching job at a pro level, I'm never going to get that opportunity again, right? If I say no now, or that's the mentality that a lot of people have. But you're 100% right. You look at where college coaches sometimes kind of get lost in the shuffle when they go to the pros, because it's not dealing with the same type of personalities that you're used to dealing with in college. You don't have the same level of authority that you do in college. Ultimately, you don't have the same control over your roster like you do in college. So
Mhm.
that's the really nice thing about being a college coach, is that you kind of have your finger all over program, as opposed to the pros. You're just another contract, right? You're at the mercy of the general manager. You're at the mercy of the owner. And ultimately, you're at the mercy of the players. So, yeah, like there's a lot to say about, is it worth, taking less money to be more comfortable, staying where I am and having job security for as long as I want it? Because, I've been there for, over a decade now. I've had a lot of success there. They're probably going to keep me as long as I want to stay. Because again, I mentioned before, like he's just 42 years old. He's not 60. He's not on the verge of retirement. He can coach for another 25 years. So do you want to be the Lavals where you've got Glenn Constantine, who's been there forever and will never leave because he knows exactly how to build his program? He knows exactly what's going to happen when he wakes up in the morning. He knows his job is safe, regardless if he wins a Vanier Cup, this year, or if he goes through 2 or 3 years of not winning it. Like, that's just the nature of how things grow. I mean, Brian Dobie, head coach of Manitoba, he's retiring at the end of this year. He's been there for over 30 years. Like, you have a level of comfort that you're never going to have in any other form of coaching that you do in college.
Mhm.
So, although, like I said, I bring it up because I think that it's an interesting name to throw in the hat for any CFL team that's kind of looking to go outside of the box. And to your point, I think that he absolutely needs to look at the NCAA, because again, are you up for a new challenge? I know he's got a young family, but is that something that everyone's kind of willing to do, to go down and see if you can actually do that? And then look, if you go down and become, a coordinator or a quarterback coach at an NCAA program and you do well, you're going to get fast tracked pretty quickly, either to the NFL or to a very, very big program in the NCAA.
Mhm.
So again, Mike Folds is just such an interesting name to keep an eye on going into this offseason, because seeing where Laurier is right now at number one and seeing where they end up, they're going to be competing for another Yates Cup and ultimately going to be competing for the Vanier Cup again. So if they can win the Vanier Cup, I think that the name looks even better than it does right now. But anyone who's kind of playing, like you love to mention, their bingo card going into the coaching carousel of the 2024-2025 offseason, pretty good name to put on your list of potential candidates for a number of different roles.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Right. But same time too, Cal calls you up and, hey, we're gonna fly you out, just tour you around the campus there. All right, Laurier, okay, get like what, 4 months of decent weather here, or I could be offensive coordinator and live on the West Coast and fast track to NFL, all of that, right? A lot of things that he'll ultimately have to weigh at the end of the day. And if he's able to hoist a championship at the end of it, just opens up even more options for him and his young family to be able to weigh and choose what decision makes the most sense for them.
Just call up our friend Dave Smart at Pacific. I mean, he's making inroads all over the place when he's down there. So
Right.
Maybe
Stanford, Pacific, Pepperdine, like anywhere on the West Coast there, they've got a bit of a leg up there on good old Laurier's campus.
well, I was just going to say he's also got an inroad at Texas Tech, so it might not be a bad fit, to bring a Canadian form of offense down to the NCAA with a pass heavy offense like Texas Tech.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Um, but we mentioned kind of, where things go into the 2024-2025 offseason for the CFL. And we're going to go back to the hockey side of things because there is a very prominent player in the NHL who's announced that the 2024-2025 season will be his absolute last in the NHL. And he's had a very storied career, multiple stops along the way, Stanley Cup winner. I think he's the third winningest goalie of all time now. And if you haven't guessed it already, we're talking about Marc-Andre Fleury of the Minnesota Wild. And again, we can name accolade upon accolade upon accolade with this man, but the guy has just been an absolute home run stud goaltender from the second he came into the NHL. He was a World Junior goalie back in 2004, or sorry, 2003, 2004. Obviously won a gold medal when he was down there, won a silver medal the year before, and then, played the majority of his career in Pittsburgh, where they went on their dynastic run in the mid 2000s to early 2010s. And along the way with stops in Vegas and Chicago and now Minnesota, Marc-Andre Fleury's really carved out quite a niche for himself, where if you're looking for a steady presence in net, everywhere he's gone along the way, the team has been exponentially better with Marc-Andre Fleury in net. And he's actually shown not a lot of signs of slowing down, even though he's talking about retirement at the end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you look at it, just A, the longevity that he's stuck around for, and B, what a high level he continues to perform at. It's truly remarkable. And it goes all the way back to, the 2003 draft class, which is absolutely loaded that he came in as a part of. And so on a previous episode of the Dine Sports podcast, this was a few years ago, we actually went back and tried to redraft, with the hindsight of how their careers played out, how they would ultimately go. Right. And I ended up still taking Marc-Andre Fleury first overall. And this is, again, this is the draft class that you've got, Shea Weber, you got Patrice Bergeron, you got Ryan Getzlaff, Brent Burns, you got Brent Seabrook, Eric Stahl, Nathan Horton, Thomas Vanek, like the list goes on and on and on. But still, out of all of them, I mean, yeah, you would love to have a franchise center. Yeah, you would love to have a multi-time Selke Award winner like Bergeron, who's won a cup, who's won a gold medal, who's done it all there. But 400 win goalies don't grow on trees, right? So, it's truly remarkable the career he's been able to carve out. And I think the most impressive thing is you put aside all of the awards and championships and this, that, the other. Like, find a single NHLer who has a bad thing to say about Marc-Andre Fleury. Right? Yeah. Like that's truly, once you get into the nitty-gritty of it, they're like, oh yeah, people always go to the Gretzkys and the, Bobby Orrs and this, that, the other. But you talk to the pros about like who were the best teammates you ever had, and they'll tell you pretty quickly the ones that they hate. And oh yeah, he could score goals, but he was someone we put up with there. Like absolutely no one has a bad thing to say about the Flower, and that's again just a huge testament that he's an unbelievable hockey player, but an even better human being on and off the ice as well.
Yeah, and I actually remember when I was playing at the University of Ottawa, and they were hosting I believe it was the World Championship team at the University of Ottawa. They were doing their training camp there, and we got to see all these guys kind of practicing, and then we're kind of sharing a facility with them because the football field is actually right beside where the hockey rinks are inside. So we're kind of crossing each other in the hallway. And when you look at Marc-Andre Fleury, he's the most unassuming looking person you've ever seen in your life.
Oh, IT support is here. Great. Yeah, my computer's over this way.
100%. I mean, he weighs 160 pounds soaking wet.
Yeah.
And obviously you can't tell when he's got this big goalie equipment on, but at the time, again, he's very young. I think he had just finished his first season in the NHL. And he's talking, he's so soft spoken. He looks like he's kind of someone's little brother who they brought out to hockey practice with them. And but just seeing the confidence that he carried himself with at that time, obviously, being a number one pick, being on the world junior team, you're kind of, sitting there with, I can be really far up my own, what, if I really wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
But the confidence that he showed was not an arrogant confidence. It was, a very humble confidence that he portrayed. And again, I always go back to that because every time I watch this guy play and I see the way that he treats people in the media, I see the way he treats his teammates, it's like that all started back then when he was a teenager. And he's never changed ever since then. He's only gotten, more likable as the time goes on. So, I mean, you look at, again, we talk about longevity, we're going back 21 years, right? 20 years. So this guy has been the consummate professional. He's been, the go-to goalie. He's taken a back seat when the team has decided to go with the young upstart like a Matt Murray or Robin Leonard. And he's kind of checked his ego at the door and said, you know what? I'm going to be here when you need me, and I'll play good hockey whenever I go on the ice. So are we going to see another player like this ever again? I don't know. Like, especially goalies. I don't think that we can see the type of player that Marc-Andre Fleury has been, where you can step in and dominate when you're given the opportunity to be the number one. You can take the back seat or kind of ride shotgun with a 1A, 1B scenario. And now kind of taking on the role of the wise veteran who has really advised a lot of, really good young talent to progress in their careers. Because you look at all those great goalies in Minnesota that have come through the last few years, like, where did Kaapo Kähkönen come from? Well, he's getting a pretty good tutor in front of him there. So, I mean, this is again, you look at the body of work that he's put in along with all the stuff outside of the ring. This guy is not only a first ballot Hall of Famer, but I think he'll go down as one of the greatest goalies to ever play the game.
Yeah. And again, right? Like you look at kind of the history of the sport here. Will we ever see another one of them again? I mean, the numbers say, yeah, at least statistically, we probably will see someone go and be dominant like that. But it's becoming harder and harder every year, right? Because, long gone are the days of, all right, 70 starts for me, 12 for you, right? So it's getting much, much tougher, and you need to play 20 plus years to get to some of these figures that some of these goaltenders are at, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of will we see another person like that again, that is equal blends of, humility and sheer on ice dominance? I don't know, right? Because you look at some of his, whether it's contemporaries or even before his time, players that put up the types of numbers that he did, like Waugh, Brodeur, Sawchuk, great goalies. All of them were kind of pricks from time to time, though, as well, too, right? And I think a lot of their own teammates would be the first ones to say that
Yeah.
about them. So again, I think statistically, on paper, will we see another Marc-Andre Fleury-esque goalie? Probably in our lifetime. Will there be a bunch of them? Probably not. But there'll probably be someone who will come close to those numbers, if not eclipse them outright. But
Yeah.
blend that with everything you just described as far as, bumping into him in the hallway, plus everything that we've got 2 decades of dirt we could have had on this guy by now, right? And I said it before, reporters sit on these stories all the time, and the second a player gets traded, it's the all right, notes dump time. Here's all the crap that I accumulated about this guy over the years because now I no longer need him for quotes, so who cares? Let's get it out there and get some clicks and
Yeah.
reads and whatnot. He's been traded and released and signed with multiple teams, and you've never seen it once. So will we see
Yeah.
another Marc-Andre Fleury blend? Probably not. Will we see it on paper? Maybe, but it's getting tougher by every season.
Yeah. And I mean, especially with the modern day analytics that come into play, it's like you don't see the dominant pitchers like you saw before. You don't see the quarterbacks like you had, back in the 80s and 90s who are going out there and they're taking these massive hits and getting right back up and playing, right? Like,
While he's playing on 2 blown ACLs, let's see how he holds up here.
yeah, I mean, like, the Philip Rivers who tears his ACL in a game straps on a knee brace and goes out and throws for 200 yards in the second half. Like we don't see that kind of stuff happen anymore,
Well,
right?
if I had 47 kids at home there too, I
You
would
have to
make sure I was
support them
going to the
somehow.
office every day too.
Yeah. His wife's just kicking out the door, like, you get back to work.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like, and we don't see goalies, like you were mentioning, getting thrown in there for 60 to 70 starts a year anymore, because a lot of these teams are looking forward to those stretch runs in the playoffs where they say, you know what, our guy's not used to playing, 16 games in a row. So we want to rest them to make sure that they're ready to go. And, again, I think we're starting to see the dying breed of, we had that run of historic quarterbacks with Manning, Breeze, Brady, Roethlisberger, goalies. We're starting to see that, last generation of like the top flight goaltender kind of fade off now. Lundqvist just retired. We've got Marc-Andre Fleury who's retiring. A lot of Pecorine just retired. Like a lot of these guys who were holding down the fort of being, the last guard, they're all kind of going away. So now we're going to see this uptick of these modern day goalies who are coming up, who again are fantastic players. They've got skill sets that are unmatched, but the longevity that we're going to see out of these players are not going to be seen again. That's the reality of
And it's very apropos to what you just said about the analytics right there, right? Because you can almost liken goalies in the NHL now to what running backs are in the NFL, where it's almost like churn and burn, get a couple good seasons, on to the next guy,
it.
right?
Yeah.
So it's absolutely becoming a not undervalued, but less appreciated and less relied upon goalie until you suddenly get to the postseason and you realize, crap, I really wish I had that star 1A goaltender here rather than, all right, which one of the tandem is it going to be? And after every single loss, we've got to answer questions from the press of who's starting the next game because, Fred and Joe are so close to one another and we've oscillated between them, 41 games apiece each season. So it's
Yeah.
definitely, something to keep an eye on how these front offices choose to kind of deploy their goaltending tandems moving forward.
And that's the fact right there that you just said. They're kind of in the same realm as a running back right now, because the teams are very hesitant to pay goalies over $8 million a season for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's like $8 million is that line that is like the forbidden space that teams don't want to go into.
Oh, don't
But
say
it's
8x8s there. Jeremy Swayman's camp will be sending you a letter here.
yeah, that's another story for another time. But like I said, it's crazy to me to think that Marc-Andre Fleury, I think, was the first $7 million goaltender, and that was like 15 years ago. And now teams are still kind of hovering around that 7 to 8 million range for where they draw the barometer for a goalie contract. And you hit the nail on the head. Goalies are worth their weight in gold when you're in the playoffs. As we saw with this last run, Edmonton was only going as far as their goalies were taking them, whether they could keep the puck out of the net or not. Like, you could score 5-6 goals a game, but if your guy's letting in 6 or 7, well, guess what, guys? We're going to be the highest scoring losing franchise in league history.
Yeah.
So, Tampa Bay, why is it that they haven't been making the cup lately? Well, probably because their best player, Andrei Vasilevsky, has been hurt and not playing as much as he used to. So, like I said, the goalie market right now is kind of in a flux situation because guys like Marc-Andre Fleury are, kind of escorting themselves the way out. And yeah, I think teams are kind of in a situation like, oh, we like who we have, but we do want to churn and burn them. We're not going to keep them around for 20 years like, New Jersey used to do with Martin Brodeur, or, talk about Ed Belfour or Curtis Joseph just getting job after job after job because they can keep the puck out. So, it's like I said, it's a sad day. It will be a sad day when we're watching the Flower kind of take his last, hurrah, and hopefully it's with the cup run with Minnesota, but he's definitely going to be missed in more than a few league circles when it comes to personalities and performers on the ice for sure.
Yeah. Circle the Wild versus Penguins final game of the season on your calendar there. I think there'll be a quite the pregame ceremony going on when that takes place.
Yeah, and rightfully so. But anyways, let's get a golf clap for the Flower for again giving us all the fantastic moments on the ice, off the ice, and ultimately just being one of those good guys that we talk about on this show.